My name is Madison Clark, and today should have been the happiest morning of my life. The silk of my ivory robe whispers against my skin as I lean against the wide bay window of our Manhattan apartment. From 20 stories up, the city hums like a restless heartbeat. Yellow cabs gliding through wet streets, steam curling from a manhole like it's exhaling secrets. On the marble counter behind me, my phone buzzes again, a soft vibration that somehow cuts through the distant sirens and the kettle's low whistle. For the third time in 10 minutes, the caller ID flashes Mom. I can almost feel the weight of her voice before I even lift the phone, sharp, urgent, laced with the kind of anger that bruises. I inhale slowly, letting the scent of freshly brewed coffee fill me, trying to ground myself in something warm. The diamond on my ring finger catches the morning light, scattering tiny prisms across the window pane. In a few hours, I'm supposed to walk down an aisle lined with roses and candlelight. My fiancé, Ryan, still asleep in the next room, believes today is nothing but joy. But I know what that ringing means. It's the echo of a fight that began months ago, a fight over $75,000 and the price my parents demanded for their blessing. I slide my thumb across the screen. Mom, I whisper, my voice barely audible even to myself. Please, not today. 6 months earlier, the December air in my hometown of Ridgefield, Connecticut, had a bite that even my wool coat couldn't keep out. I remember how the front steps of my parents' colonial-style house creaked under the frost, as if they knew what was about to break inside. Dad stood by the fireplace when I entered, hands buried in the pockets of his khaki slacks, jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. Mom perched on the arm of the leather sofa, ankles crossed, her perfume, sharp gardenia, filling the room like a warning. Madison, Mom began, smoothing a wrinkle from her skirt though it didn't exist. Your wedding is coming up fast. We've been talking, and we think it's only fair you contribute. $75,000 should cover our part of the expenses and the family travel. The words landed like ice water down my spine. I blinked. 75,000? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Dad's eyes didn't meet mine. It's nothing compared to what we've done for you all these years. My fingers trembled around the strap of my purse. But Ryan and I already have a budget. We're paying for everything ourselves. We don't need. Mom's voice snapped like a whip. It's not about need. It's about respect. If you care about this family's reputation, you'll make it happen. The lump in my throat burned. I felt 16 again, the girl who swallowed her opinions just to keep the peace. But Ryan's face flashed in my mind, his quiet strength, the way he believed in me, without conditions. I gripped the chain of the tiny silver locket my grandmother had given me, the one etched with a single word inside, steadfast. She'd pressed it into my palm the day she died, whispering, "Never let anyone sell your worth." I took a breath so deep it hurt. "No," I said finally, my voice steady despite the quiver in my chest. "I'm not giving you $75,000. Dad's head jerked up, Mom's lips thinned to a blade. "Then don't expect our blessing," she hissed. "We'll ruin this marriage before it even begins." The words stung like a slap, but the locket felt warm against my skin, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I turned toward the door, each step away from them heavier, and yet somehow freeing. In the weeks after that confrontation, I carried the echo of my mother's threat like a hidden bruise. At first, it throbbed with every quiet moment, on the subway to work, while brushing my teeth at night, until the pain transformed into something else. Fuel. Ryan squeezed my hand through those first sleepless nights, but he never tried to fight my battle for me. "You don't owe them your future," he said one evening as we sat on our narrow balcony, city lights flickering below like 1,000 unblinking eyes. His voice wasn't forceful, it was certain. And in that certainty, I felt permission to be brave. By day, I was an account manager at a mid-sized marketing firm in Soho, a job I'd once thought of as a stepping stone. Now it became my launch pad. I volunteered for every challenging project, late-night campaigns, weekend pitch rehearsals, product launches that ran past midnight. The chipped polish on my nails told the story of those months, work that came before vanity. When my boss, Catherine Reynolds, a sharp-witted woman with silver hair and the patience of a surgeon, noticed my extra hours, she called me into her glass-walled office. "Madison," she said, tilting her head as if measuring the weight of my resolve, "have you considered leading your own accounts? You've got the instincts." The offer startled me. It also lit something fierce in my chest. "Yes," I heard myself say, before fear could argue. The learning curve was steep and merciless. I stumbled through my first client presentation, my voice shaking while a dozen executives watched. I spent nights poring over market data until my eyes blurred. But Catherine's quiet nods of approval, her brief, encouraging texts, "Good call on that strategy," kept me steady. 6 months later, I landed my first major client, a lifestyle brand looking to break into international markets. I remember standing in the conference room after they signed, my hands flat against the cool table, heart racing. This time the trembling in my body wasn't fear, it was triumph. Money began to follow success. My first substantial bonus arrived with a weight I'd never felt before: independence. Ryan and I opened a joint savings account, laughing at the number as though it were a secret only we could understand. Meanwhile, I shared little with my parents. Our conversations, when they happened at all, stayed polite and shallow. I posted only the safest glimpses on social media: coffee cups, skyline photos, a quiet night in with Ryan. No celebratory promotions, no hints of the growing figures in our accounts. It wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation. On evenings when the city smelled of rain and ambition, I would sit by the window of our apartment and touch the locket against my collarbone. The engraved word, steadfast, seemed to hum with every heartbeat. My grandmother's voice was there too, like a soft echo. "Never let anyone sell your worth." And I didn't. The morning of my wedding dawned silver and soft, a Manhattan skyline wrapped in low clouds. By the time the string quartet began their warm-up in the candlelit hall, my nerves hummed like the first notes of their violins. Ryan had already disappeared to the groom's suite, leaving me a quick text: "You've got this, Mads. I'll be waiting at the end of the aisle." I was smoothing the lace sleeves of my gown when the wedding coordinator slipped in, her eyes wide. "Your parents just arrived," she whispered, as though the words themselves carried weight. For a moment, my stomach tightened the way it had on those December steps back in Ridgefield. But I touched the silver locket resting beneath the sweetheart neckline and felt its quiet pulse. Steadfast. When I finally walked into the grand foyer, Mom and Dad were standing near the tall windows that framed the glittering city. They looked perfectly composed, Mom in a pearl gray dress, Dad in a navy suit, but I caught the flicker of something like uncertainty in their eyes. "Madison," Mom began, her tone clipped, "we thought it best to speak before the ceremony." I held their gaze, letting the hush of the hall stretch. "I agree." Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't come here to fight. But you should know we were hurt. And frankly, we expected more support from you." "Support?" I repeated, my voice even. "You mean the $75,000? Mom's lips pressed thin. "It's not the money. It's the principle." I took a slow breath, the scent of roses from the floral arch carrying through the foyer. "Here's the thing," I said. "Since that night, I've built something of my own. Something I never needed to prove to you. But maybe today you should see it for yourself." I motioned to Catherine Reynolds, who had arrived quietly with her husband. She handed me a slim leather folder and gave a barely there nod. Inside were the finalized contracts for the boutique marketing firm I had just purchased, my firm, officially acquired 2 weeks earlier. I opened the folder to the first page, the embossed logo catching the light. "I own this," I said softly, letting the words settle. "I'm not just an employee anymore. I'm the CEO." Dad's brows knit together, his voice barely above a whisper. "You bought a company?" "Yes. And the value of that company exceeds the number you once demanded by more than tenfold." The silence stretched until even the quartet's distant tuning faded. Mom's eyes darted to the folder, then back to me. For the first time in my life, she seemed at a loss for words. "I didn't tell you," I continued, because I needed to know I was doing it for myself, not to earn your approval. And I will not fund respect. Not from you. Not from anyone. Their faces softened, Dad's shoulders sagging as though the weight of years had finally caught him. Mom's eyes glistened, a tremor breaking through her carefully drawn composure. You've done well, Dad said finally, the words awkward but real. I smiled, not out of triumph, but release. I've done steadfast, I said, touching the locket. Behind me, the music shifted, Ryan's cue. The doors to the ceremony opened, a spill of golden light and murmured anticipation. I turned back to my parents, my voice low but unwavering. I'm walking down that aisle with or without your blessing. But you're welcome to join me, if you can come not as people who would ruin a marriage, but as parents ready to celebrate one. For a heartbeat, they were silent. Then Mom's hand found Dad's. Slowly, almost shyly, they both nodded. The violins soared, and I stepped toward the light. The ceremony itself passed like a golden blur, vows whispered through tears, Ryan's steady hand warm in mine, the quiet click of cameras capturing a promise we'd already been living. By the time the last toast faded and the jazz band slid into a slow waltz, I felt the weight of the evening settle into something calmer, deeper. I found Mom and Dad near the balcony doors of the reception hall, where the city lights spread like a carpet of stars. They looked smaller somehow, framed by the dark sky and the soft reflection of candles in the glass. I approached, the silk of my gown whispering across the polished floor. Thank you for staying, I said, my voice low but steady. I wasn't sure you would. Dad shifted his weight, fingers fidgeting with the edge of his cufflink. You gave us reason to think, he admitted. Maybe we've been done fair. Mom inhaled sharply, her chin lifting in the old familiar gesture of pride. But then she exhaled, a quiet surrender. We wanted control, she said. It was wrong. I see that now. I let the silence breathe between us before I spoke again. I want us to move forward, I said. But only if we change how we see each other. Here's what I need, my conditions if you want to call them that. Their eyes met mine, cautious but open. First, I continued, you respect Ryan and our marriage. No more ultimatums, no threats. He's my partner, not someone you can leverage. Mom's eyes flickered with something like regret. She nodded. Second, we build a relationship that isn't based on money or reputation. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I won't measure love in dollar signs. Dad lowered his gaze, his voice rough. Fair. And third, I said softly, we start over, on equal ground. That means listening. That means forgiving, even when it's uncomfortable. The hum of the jazz band drifted through the open doors, a trumpet's low note carrying like a promise. For the first time in years, my parents looked less like figures looming over my life and more like people flawed, frightened, capable of change. Mom reached for my hand, her grip trembling. Madison, she whispered, we'll try. We don't want to lose you. I squeezed back, not to erase the past, but to mark a new beginning. Then let's make sure we don't. From across the room, Ryan caught my eye, his smile a quiet beam of approval. The locket against my skin seemed to warm, as though my grandmother herself was nodding. Steadfast, it whispered. I felt the power shift fully settle, not a victory over my parents, but a reclamation of my own worth. Later that night, after the last champagne flute had been cleared and the city outside had gone quiet, I stepped onto the rooftop terrace of our hotel. The sky stretched dark and endless, sprinkled with a few stubborn stars that managed to pierce the New York glow. Ryan joined me, his tux jacket draped over one shoulder, the crisp night air curling around us like a blessing. Everything you hoped for? He asked, his voice low enough that only the wind could overhear. I leaned against the railing, letting the steel press cool against my palms. More, I said. But not because it was perfect. Because it was real. From here, the streets below looked like thin rivers of light. Somewhere down there, my parents were in a cab headed back to their hotel. Our last hug before they left was tentative, but it was something, a fragile bridge where earlier there had only been distance. I touched the silver locket resting just above my heart. When I opened it, the single word inside caught the moonlight: steadfast. My grandmother's voice echoed in memory, warm and certain. Never let anyone sell your worth. The girl who once trembled in her parents' living room, who bit her lip to keep from crying, felt a world away. Tonight I stood as a woman who had built her own life, claimed her own power, and still found room for forgiveness. Ryan slipped an arm around me. "You handled them with grace," he said. "Your grandmother would be proud." I smiled, my eyes fixed on the horizon where the first hint of dawn traced the edges of the skyline. "She already is," I whispered. Below us, the city exhaled, a quiet murmur of taxis and late-night laughter. I closed the locket and let it rest against my skin, the metal warm from my touch. Steadfast. The word wasn't just a memory anymore, it was my marrow. I turned to Ryan, the man who had never asked me to prove anything, and felt the certainty of the life we were about to build. "I know who I am," I said softly, more to myself than to him. "And I know what I'm worth." The wind caught my veil, lifting it like a banner, and in that quiet, endless moment I understood. No threat could ruin a marriage rooted in love, and no price tag could measure the strength of a woman who refuses to sell her worth.